All right, welcome back. Now let's look at this example here and let's write down the pertinent information we need to graph this thing. So here's our rational function. So what's the first thing we're going to look at? We're going to look at the y-intercept, right? So remember, the y-intercept is everything that will make this function, all the x values, where we're going to put in 0 for the x value. So where we're going to plug in 0 for x and see what we get. Well, when we plug in 0 for x, this just reduces to 3/2. Okay? So we know that there's going to be a y-intercept. So a y-intercept is going to be what? The y-intercept is going to be at what? 0, -3/2. Okay? Now what about x-intercepts? Okay, well, x-intercepts is all the x values where this function is equal to 0. Okay, so let's see if we have any of those. Okay, so we're going to set this equal to 0. The only value that will make the 0, remember the numerator, so all we're going to do is focus on the numerator. So the function is 0 when the numerator is 0. So that means when x is equal to -3. So this is going to be -3, 0 is going to be our one and only x-intercept. 3. Okay, now we're going to turn our attention to asymptotes. So vertical asymptotes, again, we look for restricted values, which is, again, we're going to set the denominator equal to 0. And any value that makes the denominator 0 is going to be a restricted value of the domain, but also represents where asymptotes are located here. So now we're going to have an asymptote at what? So vertical asymptote at what? It's going to be at x equal to 2. Now, what about horizontal asymptotes? Well, in this case, we do have a horizontal asymptote. Notice that the degree of the top and bottom are the same. So that means, in this case here, it's going to be the ratio of the two leading coefficients, so which is 1. So that means that the horizontal asymptote, in fact, we'll just abbreviate this VA and HA. So VA and HA. So HA is going to be y equals 1. It's going to be where the horizontal asymptote is located. Okay, now, does it cross the horizontal asymptote? Okay. So now, to find out whether it crosses the horizontal asymptote, we're going to set this equal to 1 and solve for x and see if we can solve for x. If we can, then we'll have a point where it crosses the horizontal asymptote. If we run into trouble and it's not solvable, then it doesn't cross the horizontal asymptote. So I'm going to multiply both sides by x minus 2, which is going to give me x plus 3. Is equal to x minus 2. Well, which immediately we're going to have a problem. Because look what happens. If we move the x's to one side, the x's are going to cancel out. And what do we get? We get 3 equals -2, which is a false statement. That's a false statement. 3 will never equal -2, so therefore it's a contradiction. And since we reached a contradiction, there's no solution to this equation, so therefore the graph does not cross the horizontal asymptote. All right, so good. We're done with that. Now, what about symmetry? Here, if we do f of -x, right? F of -x will not give us, back to f of x, right? And it's not going to give us negative f of x. So it does not give us any kind of symmetry. At least it's not even or odd. Okay? So it's not an even or odd function. Okay, so we know it's not symmetric with respect to the y-axis, and it's not symmetric with respect to the origin. Okay? So we don't need to do symmetry. Symmetry is not going to work in this case. So now what we're going to do is let's plot the different intervals, right? So we want to look at the different intervals and plot a point inside each of the intervals, right? So what are the intervals that we want to test? Well, we've got an x-intercept at -3, and we've also got a vertical asymptote at 2, right? So when we're graphing this thing, okay, what do we got? We've got an x-intercept, so it's going to be at 0, -1.5. So let's plot this thing. Okay, so we got 0, -3.5, or excuse me, 3 halves, which is -1.5. 0, -1.5 is right about there. And then we got an x-intercept at -3, 0. Our vertical asymptote is at x equals 2. Okay, then we got a horizontal asymptote at y equals 1. Okay, so now we've got our grid, right? So that means we want to test from -infinity to 3. So we want to see where the point is close to -3. So let's do -4. Okay, so if we put in -4, what do we get? We get -4. We're going to be, well, one, is it going to be negative or positive, right? So -4 here is going to give us a negative number, and it's going to give us a negative number here. Negative divided by negative is positive, right? Because this is going to give us a -1. This is going to give us -6, which is going to give us positive what? Positive 1/6, which is definitely less than 1 and bigger than 0. Okay, so it's going to be in this area here. So 1/6, maybe it's right here. Okay, now what about in this area here, the x-intercept? Because we know across here, right? So we're below. So here's the thing. Right away, we know we're below, on this right here, we're below the horizontal asymptote. We already know that it doesn't cross the horizontal asymptote. Okay, so we know it's going to go through this point, it's going to go through this point, and this point, right? So we know it's going in some direction. So let's go here from this interval, from here to here. It's probably going to be larger negative, right? So let's do 1. If we plug in 1 here, what's happening here? We're going to get 4 over -1, which is -4. So right away, it's going to be 1, -4. So notice, we already know it's doing this. All right, so we know it's on that side, right? So now we've got to do the other side, which is on the other side of this vertical asymptote. So now we want to test a point from 2 to positive infinity. So let's do 3. What's going on at 3? So if we stick 3 in here, we're going to get what? We're going to get a positive number. Because if we stick 3 in here, we get 6 over 1, which is 6. So great. When we have 3, right? When it's 3, it's going to be 6. So 3 and 6, so that's going to be way up here. Right? So it's going to be maybe up here somewhere. Okay? So now we know it's in this quadrant, right? Now if we stick 4, what's going on at 4? If it's 4, it's going to be what? 7 divided by 2, which is 3.5. So it's going down, right? So now I know, since it's in this quadrant and it can't cross the vertical asymptote, and we know it doesn't cross the horizontal asymptote, and it's going downward, it's going to do something like this. Okay. There we go. Cool. I wonder if there's anything else. Yeah, that's it. All right. Have a great day.